Penguin Random House Canada presents The Class, Trauma and Transformation in an American Prison by Chris Hedges. Read for you by Prentice Onayemi.
For Eunice, non scio quid sit amor. Chapter 1. The Call. When you try to stand up and look the world in the face like you had a right to be here, you have attacked the entire power structure of the Western world. James Baldwin. On September 5th, 2013, I pulled my old Volvo wagon, a bumper sticker reading, "This is the Rebel Base," stuck on the back by my wife, a Star Wars fan, into the parking lot at East Jersey State Prison in Rahway, New Jersey. I had taught college-level courses in New Jersey prisons for the past 3 years, but neither my new students nor I had any idea that night that we were embarking on a journey that would shatter their protective emotional walls, or that years later our lives would be deeply intertwined. I put my wallet and phone in the glove compartment, emptied my pockets of coins, and dumped them in the console between the front seats. I made sure I had my driver's license. I gathered up my books, plays by August Wilson, James Baldwin, John Herbert, Tarell Alvin McCraney, Miguel Piñero, Amiri Baraka, and a copy of Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. I locked the car and walked toward the maximum security men's prison, past the telephone poles that dotted the parking lot, each topped with 2 square spotlights. East Jersey State Prison in Rahway was shaped like an X. At its center was a massive gray dome with boarded-up windows surrounded at its base by a ring of oxidized copper. The wings of the prison stretched out in 4 directions from the dome. The brick walls of each wing were painted a dull ochre color with off-white patches. There were 17 oblong windows on each wing with white metal bars. Turrets, with what looked like brass spikes on top, stood at the far end of these brick wings. The walls were covered with patches of ivy. The dull black roof was peaked and discolored by a patchwork of darker and lighter sections from repairs. Directly over the entrance to the prison, below the dome, was a guard tower constructed of plexiglass windows. At the base of the guard tower were large yellow letters, EJSP, set against a blue background. The prison complex was ringed with cyclone fencing topped with bright, shiny coils of razor wire. At the front entrance of the prison, on the left, stood a chrome-colored communications tower with antennas. In the lobby, which led directly into the rotunda covered by the dome, plastic chairs faced a plexiglass booth. A bulky corrections officer sat at a desk behind the plexiglass. I pushed my car keys through the small metal slot below the plexiglass, told him my name, which he checked on an authorization form, and exchanged my driver's license for a plastic visitor's badge. I sat for a half hour and waited to be called. East Jersey State Prison, originally called New Jersey Reformatory, opened in 1896 as a reformatory for juveniles. It soon became known as Rahway State Prison. There were contact visits every Sunday when the middleweight boxer Reuben Hurricane Carter was imprisoned at Rahway from 1967 until his release in 1985. A contact visit, he writes, was equal to mouth-to-mouth resuscitation for us inmates. There were numerous sports programs, including a boxing program. A drama group called Theater of the Forgotten came in every week to perform plays. Community volunteers ran various programs. The prisoners put on a variety show every year. The prison held an annual achievement night when families came to ceremonies where prisoners officially graduated from training and academic programs. There were notorious family days where, out by the back fence, girlfriends and wives would leave pregnant. All of that was gone when I arrived, part of the steady stripping down of programs that have reduced most prisons to warehouses. Rahway State Prison changed its name to East Jersey State Prison in 1988, following complaints from local residents who claimed that naming the prison after the city of Rahway negatively affected property values. Similarly, Trenton State Prison changed its name to New Jersey State Prison, but prisoners continue to refer to the prisons as Rahway and Trenton. There were riots in 1952. when about 230 prisoners seized a two-story dormitory wing and took 9 corrections officers hostage to protest a rash of beatings. Riots again erupted on Thanksgiving Day 1971, 6 months after the arrival of a new warden who abolished many recreational and sports programs and imposed a series of harsh and punitive rules. During his short tenure, there were 2 murders, 10 escapes, 3 prisoners who died from a lack of medical care, a corrections officer stabbed, another hospitalized after being attacked with a pool cue, and a strike by the prison guards. The prisoners took 6 guards hostage in the 1971 riot, along with the warden, who had foolishly waded into the crowd of prisoners and told them there was no way they could win, that all he had to do was push a button to call in the state police. As Carter recalled in his 1974 memoir, The 16th Round, from number 1 contender to number 45472, the warden was seized by the enraged mob and stabbed, kicked, beat over the back with a fire extinguisher, had a chair broken over his head, and ended up the first superintendent in New Jersey prison history to be taken hostage in a riot. The rioters, many drunk from homemade prison wine or pruno, eventually issued a list of grievances that included demands for better food, a restoration and expansion of educational and vocational programs, and an end to the chronic shortage of medical supplies, including aspirin. The prisoners in the 1971 uprising dropped bed sheets from prison windows with messages painted on them such as, "We are fighting for better food, a new parole system, and no brutality." They held out for 115 hours before negotiations finally resolved the revolt. A year later, 3 prisoners escaped by sawing through the bars of a third-floor window. Carter's book galvanized outside support from celebrities including Muhammad Ali and also Bob Dylan, who opened his 1976 album Desire with Hurricane, an 8.5-minute epic he co-wrote to publicize the injustice of Carter's imprisonment. The album sold 2 million copies and spent 5 weeks at number 1. Carter's 2 murder convictions were eventually overturned, and he was released in 1985. Dwight Muhammad Qawi, a world champion boxer in 2 weight classes, light heavyweight and cruiserweight, began his boxing career in Rahway Prison's boxing program. He was trained in the prison gym, in part, by another inmate, James Onque Scott Jr., a light heavyweight who was ranked number 2 by the World Boxing Association, WBA, and who fought in 7 sanctioned bouts televised nationally from the prison. One of the students in my first class at East Jersey State Prison, James Leake, was a New Jersey Golden Gloves champion who had spent 3 years as an Army Ranger on the U.S. Army boxing team. I boxed for nearly 3 years as a welterweight for the Greater Boston YMCA boxing team while I was a student at Harvard Divinity School. One time after class, I told Leake I would never have been a great boxer because my hands were not big, nor was I very quick. I held up my right hand with the fingers spread apart. He placed his hand flat against mine. Our hands were the same size. "It's what's in here," he said, tapping his heart. "And what's in here," he tapped his head, "that counts." Numerous Hollywood films shot scenes in the prison, including Crazy Joe, a film about Joseph Gallo, a member of the Colombo crime family, with Peter Boyle in the title role, and Lock Up, starring Sylvester Stallone and Donald Sutherland, as well as Malcolm X, directed and co-written by Spike Lee and starring Denzel Washington, He Got Game, written and produced by Spike Lee, Ocean's 11 with George Clooney and Brad Pitt, Jersey Boys, The Irishman, which was directed and produced by Martin Scorsese and starred Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci, and The Hurricane, a 1999 biopic with the boxer played by Denzel Washington, who was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor for his portrayal of Carter. My students usually lived with a bunkmate, or bunkie, in double cells roughly 15 feet long, 4.5 feet wide, and 10 feet high. The cells were grouped together in cell blocks, or wings. If they lived in a single cell, on one wing or four-wing, the cells were about 9 feet long and 7 feet high. Most prisoners could hold out their arms and touch each side of the cell wall. Those in single cells could also usually reach up to touch the ceiling. There was a metal toilet, a metal wash basin, 1 or 2 bunks, a table, a footlocker, shelves, and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It was sweltering in the summer, and cold and drafty in the winter.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?